Hi everyone, welcome back to Passmore Books. I'm Brittany Passmore, and today I want to talk to you about some spooky books that are good to read in October that are not actually scary, if that makes any sense. So let's get started and pass some more books. So I don't like being scared. I don't read a lot of thrillers, mysteries. Horror is a genre that I just almost never ever touch. As far as Halloween goes, I think it's so fun to dress up as characters and fun costumes. I don't want the blood and gore. I don't want to go to haunted houses. I don't want to watch tons of scary movies. I can tolerate some intense movies, but not like scary movies. Since a lot of booktubers are talking about spooky, scary, thriller, mystery books that they are excited to read this month or that they recommend that you try out in October, I thought maybe I would give some more low-key, still intense and fun and kind of books that give off a bit of that spooky vibe but aren't actually scary for the people like me who don't want to be scared to death. So the first book I want to talk about is actually the first book in a series. It's called I Am Not a Serial Killer by Dan Wells. It's a pretty fast, easy read, and at first it seems like a bit more of like a thriller, and there's kind of a fantasy element that might throw a few readers for a loop if you're not expecting it. The premise of the book is that there's this teenage kid living in a small town, and he doesn't really fit in. He's kind of weird, but you realize pretty quickly that he's basically a sociopath and that he is actually on track to becoming a serial killer eventually. He fits the prototype of a serial killer, and he's basically set up rules for himself to not be a serial killer because he knows that violence and killing people and stalking people is wrong, and so he's created a set of rules for himself so that he won't start taking steps to actually become a serial killer. So eventually it becomes apparent that there's somebody in his town and seems to be killing a lot of people off, and there's some strange patterns, and he becomes obsessed with trying to figure out who this killer is because he realizes that he's the perfect person to figure out who they are because he knows so much about serial killers. And there's a fantastical twist that comes up as he starts to find out more about who the serial killer is. But I loved this series. I wasn't sure how I would feel about it because it already comes across as such a dark tone, right, dealing with serial killers, but there's actually so much humor and really interesting character conflicts that our main character is dealing with. I love the fact that he wants so badly to do the right thing and be good, and it's not easy for him to do the right thing, but he wants to, and there's great conflict. He has a great sense of humor. I loved getting to know a very different perspective from my own that John has, and it doesn't get super gory, bloody, gross, scary. There's some intense stuff because he gets in some dangerous situations trying to track down a killer. It's manageable enough, I could handle it, I wasn't overwhelmed. Going into this book, and series, if you really want to read it, you're going to want to be prepared for lots of talk about death because John himself has grown up working in a mortuary. He's very comfortable with death and dead bodies and doesn't necessarily think about them the same way that we do, and knows that. But it's a lot of fun trying to help John kind of solve the mysteries and put the pieces together, and it's a really fun read. The next book I would recommend you try is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I actually have the second book in the series that just came out last month right here. I read it in 4 days. It's so fun. In this series, there's magic. It's a little bit like Harry Potter magic, where there's like the wizards and there's also like the non-magical people who can't do magic, don't really see the magic around them. There's a wizarding school as well in this universe, but kind of the twist on this, it's not like the wonder and awe of Harry Potter. It's a little bit grittier, darker. I think one way that someone has described this book is like dark academia, if you're into that. So this wizarding school is called the Shalomance, and it's meant to try to protect all these like teenage wizards who are growing into their magic and learning to control their mana. The thing is, there's tons and tons of monsters in this world that like feast on mana, and their whole goal is to just like track down wizards and eat them up. So these poor wizard kids go to this school and are basically like locked into this school for 4 years to try to learn how to defend themselves and keep themselves alive, all while these crazy monsters are trying to creep into the school and break in and eat them. Literally, like a typical day for a student in the Shalomance is to like wake up, check your room to make sure that there are no monsters hiding in your room, find a buddy to go with you to the bathroom so that you can watch each other's back while you're brushing your teeth or showering or using the bathroom or whatever, and kill any monsters that might be in the bathroom waiting for you. Also have a buddy to go all the way to the cafeteria for breakfast, fight your way through the cafeteria line like killing monsters as you're trying to get your food, trying not to be eaten by a monster while you're trying to get your own breakfast. You set a perimeter around your table in the cafeteria to make sure that no monsters are gonna like come out of the vent above you or something like that. Like, you're literally fending for your life every single second in this school. The main character, her name is Galadriel, but people call her Elle. Well, not a lot of people even call her that because she doesn't really have a lot of friends. She's a very sarcastic, not snobby, snarky, I guess. She has definitely a dark side to her. Every wizard has some sort of affinity, something they're just naturally good at and drawn to, and her affinity, it turns out, is to become a dark evil sorceress. She literally will ask the school to give her a spell so that she can just like clean up her room, and the school will be like, oh, you want a spell to like raise an entire city and destroy an entire city? And she's like, no, I really just want to clean my room, like just like a sweeping spell would be nice. And the school's like, oh yeah, here's a spell to destroy an entire city. She kind of struggles to fit in and be normal, and also to not give in to this dark side that is just calling to her constantly. And the series is basically about her trying to survive this really deadly school and also trying to kind of navigate her natural tendencies toward this evil sorcery. Something you should be prepared for is just a very sarcastic tone from Elle. It's definitely a little bit of a different prose style that I'm used to, because Elle kind of talks to you as the narrator in almost like a stream of consciousness kind of narration, which is a little bit different for me. I don't read that a ton. But one thing that I love about Naomi Novik's books is that like every single book or series that she has such a different tone and style to it. It's different than her dragon series, it's different than her fairy tales. Potential warning, if you don't like swearing, the first book seemed to have a lot of swearing to me, but I'm wondering if this is just because I found the UK version on Libby rather than the US version on Libby, because the second book had like way less swearing, which I know for sure is a US edition. So if you aren't a fan of cuss words, watch out for that. As I was brainstorming just more books that have kind of a fun October feel, I couldn't help but think of Agatha Christie and her book And Then There Were None. I know that's probably like so cliche and everybody talks about Agatha Christie, she's so popular, but like I'm not a big one who's like into mystery books unless it's like a fantasy book that has mystery in it or things like that, you know? And I remember reading this book for the first time in 9th grade and not being like excited to read it, but then like as soon as I started it, I was like so invested and so surprised by how much I loved it. So And Then There Were None is a book that's still kind of near and dear to my heart as one that I just loved so much, even way back when in 9th grade. So if you're looking for like some mystery kind of thriller, mostly like mystery, Agatha Christie is just a really good place to start if you haven't gotten into mystery but want to try it out. And Then There Were None is a book about these 10 people who get invited to an island who they've all just kind of been invited under mysterious circumstances. They don't really know why they're there, and so they're hanging out trying to figure out like why they've been called to this island, and then suddenly somebody dies, and they're trying to figure out what happened, and then another person dies, and they start to realize that people are dying according to this nursery rhyme that has been like playing and been involved like from the start of the book. And these people are suddenly scrambling, trying to figure out how to stop it, trying to figure out like who's going to be the last person left, who's been like orchestrating all these murders. And it's clever to see how the nursery rhyme deaths kind of come about, but also like the ending is very, very satisfying. The ending, really. If hopefully none of you have had it like spoiled to you, because I had no idea how it was gonna end. I didn't know anything about the book when I picked it up, and getting to read the ending like for the first time, not knowing what was coming, was like so satisfying. I thought it was so well done and such a great surprise. So hopefully if you want to pick up And Then There Were None, you hopefully don't know anything about it. Try not to spoil it for yourself, because the ending is really, really satisfying. If you've already tried And Then There Were None, or maybe you tried it and didn't like it, like maybe try another Agatha Christie book, because she has written a lot and there's a lot of cool things. I've not read, I don't think, any of her other books yet, but given how much I enjoyed just one of her books, I would guess that she's a good place to go try out some mysteries for the first time. This next book I wanted to recommend kind of like a thriller, because I know thrillers are really popular during October, but like most domestic thrillers, I don't get very excited by, and I get kind of like freaked out. The thing is, when you're a mom and you have like a young child and you read about people like kidnapping children or things like that, like it gives you nightmares, like really bad nightmares, and you don't want that. This thriller that I'm going to recommend is not like the most intense scary thriller. Like I said, I don't like being scared. It's actually a short story, and it's by Brandon Sanderson. It's called Snapshot. Most of you probably haven't heard of it, because if you've heard of Brandon Sanderson, you're probably mostly familiar with his Cosmere, the Stormlight Archive. His short stories aren't quite as well known, but Snapshot was really, really fun. The premise is that there's this technology that allows you to like almost go back in time. You can kind of recreate the exact setting of like a past day and like go into that setting and interact with the people and the things that happened on that day. It's called a snapshot. Duh. So there are these specific detectives who go into snapshots to go into the day and be there to try to observe and see like things that really happened. Like if you're trying to prove that someone like murdered somebody else, or trying to prove that like somebody was here at a certain time, you know, whatever you're trying to prove in a certain criminal case, you can actually go there and watch and see it happen. The trick with these snapshots is the more that you interact with the snapshot, the less accurate that snapshot is, because the actual snapshot responds to you and the way you interact with it. Things can turn out differently in the snapshot than they actually did in real life if you're interacting too much and trying to do things yourself. So you have to be careful to try to be there like as an observer and like in the background, so that you're not disturbing things too much. So we're following these like two detectives in this snapshot as they have like two things that they're trying to like figure out in the snapshot. Like something in the morning that they're trying to like get some evidence for and see, and then something later in the afternoon, evening. And they keep getting caught up in things a little bit over their head. It's really fast-paced, it's fun, some fun twists and turns that you may or may not predict. If you're interested in more of like a thriller but don't want anything like too intense, like it's not scary. It's not scary. It's great. the last book I wanted to talk about is actually a really, really short, like really short story. Like Brandon Sanderson's short stories, like they're still pretty long. This next one is like really short. I think it's just 16 pages. It's called The Yellow Wallpaper. This was a book that was recommended to me by Murphy Napier, and I think this is probably, besides maybe I'm Not a Serial Killer, which has like definitely a little bit more violence in it, The Yellow Wallpaper is definitely a little bit more creepy and intense that way, but I don't know. I think you just have to be prepared for like a psychological trip, kind of. Let me give you background information on the author first. I'm sorry, I don't even remember her name, but basically the author was like diagnosed with depression, and her doctor at the time suggested that for her treatment, she just sit in a room all by herself with like nothing in there, nothing to distract her, nothing to do, and that all she should do is stare at the yellow wallpaper in front of her. And he thought that that would somehow help her. She was basically like isolated, not allowed to do anything, not allowed to talk, sing, draw, read, like nothing to do to express herself. She was just supposed to sit and stare at this yellow wallpaper. And she did, and it was very much to her detriment. She became worse after time just staring at this yellow wallpaper. And so she eventually wrote this story to try to illustrate some of the hard things that she went through with that kind of thing. Eventually, actually, her trying to speak out against this kind of treatment helped doctors change the way that they treated people with depression and other mental illnesses. So the story is sad. You should know that. But it's about a woman who is, again, dealing with some mental things and goes to a house to get away with her husband, and kind of develops an unhealthy relationship with the yellow wallpaper in her room. It's kind of, the language is really engrossing and beautiful, and you love how you're getting to know this woman, and I think she's actually like writing it as if she's writing down like in her journal, and so you're starting to see like you really see her mind and her psychology working through all this. And it's really, really sad to see the relationships she loses around her, and how like in just 16 pages you see a little bit of a descent into like, I don't know, I don't want to talk too much about this and spoil it, but anyway, it's a really, really fast read, and really, it can hit you kind of powerfully to read it. Maybe just be aware that like mental health is a big component of this. Well, I think even though it's a little creepy, I think it's fascinating, and really telling of how important it is for us to live our lives in a healthy way and have positive interactions around us. Okay, so those are all the books that I wanted to recommend to you to maybe try out this October, this fall, especially if you're wanting something like a little bit spooky, a little bit intense, but not actually scary, not like overwhelming, like something that could really disturb you. I think these are all pretty tame reads that are exciting, fun, but can also just give a little bit of a spooky vibe. So there we go. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, if you like chatting with me about books, please subscribe to my channel. Feel free to give this video a thumbs up, and be sure to comment below and tell me about any spooky reads that you're enjoying this month, and we'll see you all next time to pass around some more books. Bye!